Periodically, I like to do a Q&A, and there's some really good questions today, so we're gonna go ahead and jump right into it. From Frosty, I have yet to take my first kayak camping trip. I'd love to know what kind of unsexy behind the scenes stuff do you have to deal with that doesn't make it into videos? A lot. So he then goes into a few different categories: planning, packing, travel logistics, problems on the river, etc. So let's go ahead and dive into each one of these real quick, because things will go wrong. I mean, it's like Murphy's Law out on the river. Everything that can go wrong will. So first of all, with planning, this is one of the places where you can try to mitigate that downside, if you will. And with proper planning, you can really have a great time. I always stress that you try to do an adequate amount of river mileage for your region. So out here in Texas, I generally do about 1 mile of river per hour. That's kind of what I plan for. So if I want to paddle for 6 hours one day, I'll plan for 6 miles. If you're in a northern river or out east or up in the mountains where there's much higher flow rates, then you can definitely get away with double or even triple that. But we just don't have much water in our rivers, and so it's always a big effort to cover mileage. We like to keep it low there. As far as packing goes, I actually just released a packing list video, and I'm going to include a link to my entire kit below. But this is honestly one of those things that even as a beginner you can completely nail, because there's so many good videos out there showing people what they pack. Kind of a little pro tip, go watch some backpackers videos. They do a really good job of bringing only the necessities, and a lot of what they bring on their trips really does convert over to kayak camping. Travel and logistics getting there. We always make sure to have a car at the top or the launch and a car at the exit, and that way we can kind of shuttle between the two. I've never really used a shuttle, but I know they're out there and they're very popular, and it's a great way if you're just doing a solo trip or you're only going to take one vehicle. It's a great way to utilize those. Problems on the river, I mean, this is where stuff really does go wrong, because it's so adventurous when you get out there. I mean, every single trip I think I've ever been on probably hasn't gone completely according to plan, and that's honestly what makes it fun. It's anything from not being able to find campsites to not covering as much river mileage as you thought you would. That's all going to play into the unsexiness of a river trip. In fact, when we were just in the Santa Elena Canyon, that was one of the hardest trips I've ever done. We planned a boomerang trip because the flows were so low, which is an out and back. You basically use the launch and exit, that's the same place. Well, we ended up having to drag our kayak so much more than we thought. There was a ton of flow going through there, even though it was super shallow. Everything from reeds to the face to hiking and the heat, it was just an exhausting process. When it's hard, sometimes you don't appreciate your surroundings, and that's when you just need to take 5, settle down, and really try to take it all in, because it's going to be tough out there. I think this was a great question, and actually I'm probably going to do an entire video on it because I could go on this for hours. All right, and the second question from D. Jenny. What do you do different for saltwater paddling trip or a river trip? Yeah, that's a great question. So a saltwater trip is going to be flat water, and I'm assuming you're probably going to be doing some fishing or touring. So flat water touring is pretty fun because you can go into like mangroves and stuff, but really the only difference between the two is going to be washing your boat off. If you're in a saltwater environment, as soon as you take your boat out, spray it down, get it clean, otherwise you're going to see your metal components start to rust out. Salt is very harsh on equipment, your camping equipment, and that's going to be tough. I know as far as camping goes, it's all real similar. There's certainly a lot of rivers that have beach type environments, and so you're just going to get really sandy on saltwater trips. As for me, whenever I go on river trips, I generally am going to rocky places, and so it's just a little bit cleaner. You aren't getting sand everywhere inside the tent, your sleeping bag, and your food. So I don't know, I guess it's a little bit, I prefer river trips over the saltwater counterparts. A Buck, have you thought about doing the Texas water safari either yourself or documenting a team doing it? I think you do an amazing job covering it. Thank you, appreciate it. However, I understand how daunting a task it is to finish the TWS, let alone document it at your level of production. So if you're curious about the Texas Water Safari, it's basically like this race all the way from San Marcos, which is the headwaters of San Marcos River, and then you paddle hundreds of miles downstream and then across a bay all the way to the Gulf of Mexico. And it's like an absolute grind. I think it takes people like 2-3 days, and the winning teams don't stop at all. They just keep pushing through, and it's nuts. So with that said, I have zero plans to do the Texas Water Safari. I have zero plans to document anybody doing it. That's not to say that I won't ever document it. I just don't have the time right now. As you guys can tell, I'd struggle to get out a ton of uploads. and that's just because I put a lot of effort into each one, and I try to make sure it's the best product I can release. And so maybe one day if I have more time on my hands, but props to everybody who does those. I used to be really into adventure sports and kind of like the endurance racing type stuff with Ironman and marathons and triathlons, and I don't miss that at all. There was a lot of training, a lot of sacrifice, and just not something I'm really that interested into anymore. That's actually how I got into kayak camping, was once I finished up all those endurance sports. And I much prefer this. It's a little more chill. All right, Glenn Davis. What hammock do you recommend for camping on the river? Hammock, rainfly, underquilt, thanks. Yeah, I use the Ridge Outdoor Gear 360 Pinnacle hammock, and this is one that has a built-in bug net. It's very budget at like $50 or $60. It's absolutely insane what you get for the money. I have yet to see an offering that has 11 feet in length, so me at 6'2", I'm sleeping flat, and then also the budget mindedness, plus it has all the gear if you wanted to hang an underquilt. I did just use it for the first time hammock camping in the winter over at Caddo Lake. I wasn't totally stoked about the underquilt that I used. It was just a generic synthetic insulation type of deal, and I don't have a real underquilt, so I can't recommend one yet, but I am on the lookout, so if you guys have any recommendations, please shoot them my way. I'm all ears. As far as a rainfly, I have actually never had to use a rainfly on any of my trips. That's not to say I haven't chucked one up, and when I do, I have this Eno, I think it's like the Pro Fly. It's nothing special, honestly. I think you'll probably have a better time reading through comments and figuring out a rainfly there, because you guys always make excellent recommendations down in the comments. Eric Roque, what river shoes do you use? Right now I'm just wearing Chacos. I'm not really stoked on Chacos anymore. I think they used to be much better built and they used to serve my trips a lot better, but I no longer really take them. I have been enjoying my Astral water shoes. They have an insane level of grip, and also they kind of look like shoes, so you can wear them to lunch and whatnot and not look completely out of place. Nanwal, this is a question that I know a lot of you guys have been waiting for, and that is, how do you find a group to go kayaking and kayak camping with? I don't have any friends interested in the hobby. I'm extroverted and want to put together a group, but don't know where to start. Yeah, that's a great question, and one that comes in pretty often, and there's a really good solution for it. The Facebook groups local to your area are going to be the best place to go and connect with other paddlers. In our Texas groups, I see people connecting all the time, putting together trips on different rivers in different parts of the state, and it's everything from kayak camping to just regular kayaking. So that's what I would challenge you to go with. Just search like Texas kayak camping or Louisiana paddling group or Houston paddling group, something like that, and I guarantee you'll find one. There's a lot of them out there, and they're really good places to connect, talk about gear, share videos, trip reports, and just get a better understanding for the conditions that you should be aiming for on your local waters. Also, get in touch with a kayak shop. They're oftentimes out there teaching people how to kayak and selling boats and just really getting involved in the community. So I would definitely reach out to them. They're gonna be a good tool for that. Scooter Barrow, hi. How do you know how far you will paddle in a day? Yeah, that's a great question. Kind of touched on it earlier, but here in Texas on lower flows, I always budget 1 mile per hour of paddling that I want to do, and that's really served me well. On my first original camping trips, we planned, it was like 14 miles, and the flow rates weren't up, but I didn't know how much mileage to budget for. And it ended up being such a grueling day that we were all exhausted, and I didn't bring a sleeping bag, and I was freezing. So it was a disaster of a trip. That was the one that started it all. Even though it was a complete mess, I loved every part of it. And how much? Once again, connect with your Facebook groups and get an understanding of the cubic feet per second flow rates on your rivers. And, some of the more popular rivers are going to have information on the internet about trip reports and whatnot. So definitely seek that out. From Keaton, who is your favorite small town friend that you met in Lubbock? Hey, that's Keaton Muxworthy, right? Yeah, so I went to Texas Tech for college up in Lubbock, and driving from Houston up to Lubbock is an 8-hour effort. It is so far away. It's like 500 miles, and you pass through all these little small towns on the way up there. And I remember distinctly, I passed through this one town, and I was like, man, who on earth would live here? It seemed like a quaint little place. It was kind of on the western edge of the hill country, But as you drive through, it's one of those one stoplight towns. As you drive through, there's a banner that crosses the one main road, and it's like, Hamilton welcomes hunters. And it was like deer season or something. I was like, oh, that's hilarious. Like, you are truly in small town America. Well, it turns out one of my good buddies was from there, and I would meet him, you know, a couple weeks later whenever social life kind of got started in college. But yeah, Keaton, need to hang out again, man. Miss you. All right, Carl Berg, what are you usually packing with you for a trip? Seen some of your videos and you inspire me to step up my camping food game. Yeah, we love to cook good food. We don't really do the freeze-dried stuff unless we're gonna go on a longer trip effort. We always love grilling out. Oh man, it just hits different when you're in the riverbed. So he usually just packs dry food that only needs hot water. Yep, I see a lot of people do that to save weight, and it really does cut down on weight because then you don't need a cooler, but we like that fresh food. Got any tips for food that holds well on a trip, and what kind of tools you use? Yeah, that's an excellent question, because I don't know about you guys, but whenever I'm out there, I kind of want to have a little bit of luxury, and one of the best ways to do that is good food. It certainly tastes better after a long day out on the river. And what we like to do is take hamburgers and sausages. Occasionally you'll see someone bring a steak, but a steak's a little bit hard to nail and then eat just because you need a plate and utensils and whatnot. With hamburgers and sausages, you don't need any dishes, which makes it super easy. It doesn't produce any trash, which is nice. So the tools that we like to use, I like to bring tongs and then my grilly put. It's a little miniature grill, and that thing is so clutch. It packs down super small, and it's treated me well. It's super durable, and I love the way it gets down close to the coals, and you can grill up some good food. Sausage and cheeseburgers, man, those are so easy to do, and they taste great. So yeah, we like to do that. All right, Jason Johnson, what's up, man? What states are in the books for trips this summer? Man, I want to go to so many, but I only have limited time. So right now, I kind of have planned a road trip from Houston up to Colorado, but I don't know how much paddling I'm going to be able to do. I would like to hit up a couple of rivers there. It's not specifically a paddling trip, more so kind of just like a camping overland style trip, but I'd like to bring the canoe behind me because it's just super easy to haul around, and hopefully that'll turn into some cool spots for day paddles. I would love to get up to Arkansas and do something like the Buffalo River or maybe even the Current River in Missouri. That might be more of a late summer type of event, because what I really want to do is the Devil's River here in Texas. You know, that's like 5 hours away, and it's probably the most popular river for kayak camping in the state of Texas. It's supposed to be super pristine, and it looks amazing just on the videos I've watched. So that'd be really, really, really cool. All right, Juan Vega, what are idle flow rates for the Upper Guadalupe to have an awesome time? Above 50 CFS on the lower or Upper Guadalupe, and you'll have a good time. Below that, you're gonna be dragging a lot. Obviously, I would like to see north of 100, but you can't always get that. In fact, rarely do you get that. All right, Gasha Kokinen. I just butchered that, but we'll go with it. How do you plan a kayak camping trip? Can I just get on any river in my area and camp on the side of it? Where do you find the rules for this kind of thing? I'm so confused, please help. Hey, this is a super common question, and one that I'm actually gonna dedicate an entire video to. I think part of her question is geared towards the navigability laws that I kind of will mention frequently in my videos. And yeah, those are hugely important. It's kind of unique, but here in Texas, we have very friendly river navigability laws. And essentially, if it's a big river, you can camp in it. Now, I always urge you to read up on the laws yourself, because that's the only way you're going to be able to legally camp. It's very kind of gray where the riverbed ends and private property begins, and so you just want to be very knowledgeable about that in case you have a landowner come and approach you and be like, hey, what are you guys doing? And at the end of the day, if you do get approached, if you're just nice and courteous, you're likely not going to have a problem, even if you're in the gray area. So for me, in most states, if you just aim for an island, you can't go wrong there. But another kind of rule of thumb I use is if it's routinely swept clean, like there's no vegetation, plants, grass, or weeds, and it's just all rocks or sand, that's going to be considered a part of the riverbed. Now, there are places like Oklahoma that are super unfriendly, where basically if you get out of your kayak and step on the ground, you're trespassing. Now, I'm not the biggest fan of those rules. It's kind of a drag, but they do have quite a bit of public land up in Oklahoma, so that makes it better. Here in Texas, we don't really have public land that's accessible for most of the population. And so, fortunately, the kayak camping deal is kind of a loophole. And with that regard, I think that's why I'm so drawn to it, because there's veins of public land all throughout Texas, even though we might not have huge swaths of BLM or national forest. So that's, one of the main reasons why I'm really attracted to kayak camping. Yeah, this is a wonderful question. I'll definitely answer it in more detail in a later video. All right, Carson Taylor, can you make a video about your cameras and how you use them? I may or may not make a video. I did just do kind of a live stream interview style video with Pete Beck over at the River Kings, and we talked about filming and camera gear and storytelling for like 2 hours. And then Wes Robertson, when are you getting a whitewater boat, dude? It's kind of funny you asked that. Probably never, truth be told. I used to actually own a Katana 9.3, which is about a 9-foot kind of whitewater, but it has a dry hatch, so you can do some real lightweight kayak camping with it. And I actually sold it before I ever even took it on a trip. It just didn't feel like it fit in my arsenal very well. So right now, I'm super content with a sit-on-top kayak and then my hybrid canoe kayak style boat from Old Town. Really enjoying it. Maybe what I'll do is add a 10-foot sit-on-top, because I feel like as far as the rivers that I'm going to be doing, you can do a lot of pretty hairy water in a sit-on-top kayak just because it drains so quickly. In fact, I took my 12-foot Old Town Sportsman 120 out on a flooded Medina River when it was at 1,000 CFS, and man, there was some juicy stuff, and it handled just fine. So yeah, we don't really have whitewater in Texas. Probably not something I'm going to add anytime soon. That's going to wrap it up for this video. I'm going to go out for a nice paddle here in Charlotte Lake, one of my favorite places here in Houston, and just go enjoy the sunset. Looks like we're about to get some peak colors. I'll catch you guys on the next one. See ya.